Renglich, and I'm going to speed through this because I have a lot to say and I want to share as much as possible in these 5 minutes. I'm coming to you from more of an experiential point of view than an academic, as some of my colleagues will be. I'm the coordinator of a provincial network of food and farming cooperatives in Ontario, and we're calling ourselves the Local Organic Food Co-ops Network. Necessarily, we're built from co-ops that are taking alternative approaches to the food system. So we have not invited groups like Growmark and Agris into this cooperative network, but we're more based in groups that are working with their communities. So just a quick question to you, why cooperate? This is something I hope that you're thinking about as you're engaging in co-ops or working with co-ops. And there are many reasons to cooperate that we know. One of the most important, I think, in the food system is that it allows smaller players the opportunity to band together and have any sort of a fighting chance against an industrial food system, which is very alienating. The other big part of this for me is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. This is sort of a that you may be familiar with, but that together we can do a lot more than we can do on our own. So for those of you who may be a little bit less familiar with co-ops, I just want to share with you the 7 cooperative principles that govern cooperative activity around the world. These come from the International Cooperative Alliance and the Statement of Cooperative Identity. So these are the 7: voluntary and open membership, which means all are welcome, but no pressure to join. Second is democratic member control, and this is the key difference between co-ops and other forms of business. One member gets one vote. It doesn't matter how much time or money you put in. As one individual, one member, you have only that small amount of say. The third is member economic participation, so no free rides. These plain language principles come from the co-operators. They did sort of a translation. Sorry, skipping on. Autonomy and independence, which means self-control of the cooperative. The fifth is education, training, and information. We share, we learn, we grow. It's really important to educate people about co-ops because they're still not widely understood in most of society. Number 6 is cooperation among cooperatives, and this is the principle that our network is built upon, that co-ops intrinsically have this desire to share what they're doing and learning with other co-ops because we need to be strengthening one another, but it's so important that it's entrenched in our cooperative principles. The 7th is concern for community, and this is the reason co-ops begin. They fill a need in a community that perhaps governments or markets are not filling. So co-ops in Canada, here are just a few numbers for you. Did you know there are 9,000 co-ops in Canada? 1 in 4 Canadians is a member of a co-op or credit union. Can you put up your hand if you're a member of a co-op or credit union? And are any of you with your hands down shoppers at Mountain Equipment Co-op? You're also members. In Canada, co-ops have 1.4 million members and 15,500 employees. These statistics are a little bit old, actually. Sorry, this photo, does anyone know the co-op that this is from? Can you see it? This is from Arctic Co-ops, a really impressive federation of co-ops in northern Canada. And I have lots more information I can share about them if you're interested. Co-ops provide 100 million jobs around the world, which is amazingly 20% more than transnational corporations. They have a share of almost 40% of all milk products in Canada. 35% of the world's maple syrup comes from co-ops in Quebec, and co-ops market almost 60% of all poultry and eggs produced in Canada. Co-ops can be owned by lots of different kinds of stakeholders. The most common are consumers, producers, and workers. In the food and farm system, we've come to call them eaters, farmers, and workers, as well as other stakeholders. So you can have commercial partner member owners or nonprofit member owners. And there's been a lot of research recently out of Quebec, BC, and Alberta that are demonstrating that co-ops actually outlive corporations at a rate of almost 2 to 1. And weather economic recession is far better than any other form of business. So this is really useful in economic crisis and times of downturn. Here's some information. I'm not sure if you'll see it as related. This is a lot of what was driving things like the Occupy movement, this unequal dispersion of wealth within our society. And I want to bring it a little bit closer home in terms of farm revenue. You see the 0.4% is the share of revenue that farmers earn as compared to suppliers and banks that profit off of farms. And here is the breakdown in terms of co-ops. So we have in 1952, 47 cents of the dollar of a farm product, what a consumer would pay for a farm product, would go to the farmer. In 2000, 2010, that was only 20 cents on the dollar, whereas through a co-op, the average is 60 cents on the dollar. Here's the breadth of food and farm co-ops that I've been working with, and these are all the alternative food and farm co-ops. So you may recognize some of these names. Many are from Ontario, because that's where I'm from. But I also want to point out powerful federations and organizations like ACORN in Atlantic Canada, which is the Organic Regional Network. The Potluck Food Co-op on the right there comes from Yukon. The Kootenai Co-op, we have the president of the Kootenai Co-op here with us, Abra Bryn, who's now coordinating Food Secure Canada's local sustainable network. And groups like the Elmira Producers Auction Co-op, they're at all different levels of the food chain or food web. So, democracy. This is what co-ops are famed for, is that they're democratic institutions or organizations. They're democratically owned, democratically controlled, and democratically benefiting. So my question to you is, how democratic is a co-op really? And if you think about your own experiences within a co-op, or your own knowledge of some of the bigger co-ops in our society, question a little bit, what does that democracy actually look like? Oh no. Justice, this is a picture of the founding fathers of co-ops, 1844 in Manchester, England, who started Rochdale. Just notice who they are. And I also want to ask you, do you think 1844 was really the birthplace of cooperatives? We've had mutual aid societies for thousands of years since people began to work together to help each other out. So now this is becoming a question of race and justice in the food and co-op movements. And this on the right is an image of Japanese Canadian Fishermen's Co-op in BC in the early 1900s. So a very early form of cooperation in Canada. Sovereignty, this is about ownership within co-ops, making consumers co-producers or co-owners of the business or the food system that they're engaged in. And this is an example of cooperation among cooperatives, a co-op product in a co-op retailer sold through a co-op distributor. So co-ops trying to innovate to build more cooperative supply chains. Inclusivity, who's at the table? This is our youngest co-op. They're a daycare cooperative in Toronto, and their focus is all on food and gardening and education. So this year is the International Year of the Cooperative, and World Food Day was all about how agricultural cooperatives could feed the world. We don't see that as strongly here in Canada today as we've seen it in the past, or even as we see it in other countries today. So it's really important to be learning from other parts of the world and other successful models. Again, notice who is in the photographs when we think about inclusivity. These are boards of directors and staff people from co-ops in Canada. And I question you to think about who are they representing and who are they serving. Transformations, this is a great example of how one little co-op in Stratford, Ontario is transforming their local economy. They celebrated their first year. They were created in order to create jobs for themselves. 5 worker owners, all born in different decades, and the youngest, the 21-year-old, is the president. They have kept $310,000 in their local economy in their first year of operation in terms of wages, taxes, rent, and all the rest. Just a note to say that our network is built upon this principle of transformation. So we invite co-ops into the network who are working to transform the food system in some way. I was going to talk about solidarity, but I'll just skip through it. This is Gandhi celebrating the year of the co-op. And if co-ops are so great, why aren't everybody cooperating? Why isn't everyone cooperating? I would say it's because they're administratively burdensome. We're looking at ways of sort of developing co-op light for people who don't want to go through all the paperwork. They're slow and messy and democratic, and so it takes a long time to come to decisions. There's a lot of sweat equity and initial capitalization costs involved. This can be really daunting, as well as really relegated to certain levels of society, I would say. And no one teaches us how to cooperate after we leave elementary school.